Greetings, fragile beings. Tonight's nightmare doesn't begin with a legend or a missing person poster. It begins with a father asking his daughter for just a little help in the basement of their quiet Austrian home, and ends with one of the darkest secrets Europe has ever uncovered. Now let's dive in. Before that day, there had always been a quiet tension inside the Fritzl home. Joseph ruled the house like a dictator. Strict, cold, impossible to predict. His wife and most of the children stayed silent when he was around, doing anything they could to avoid conflict. But Elisabeth was the only one who ever dared to push back, the only voice in a house full of fear. And Joseph hated that more than anything. Fast forward. August 28th, 1984 began like any ordinary day for 18-year-old Elisabeth Fritzl. No warnings, no strange behavior. Just her father calling her downstairs to the workshop beneath the house, a place she had been countless times before. He told her he needed help holding a heavy door in place, a simple task, a routine chore, nothing more. But once she stepped inside that narrow corridor, the world she knew ended. As soon as the final door was fitted, as soon as she turned to go back upstairs, he struck, fast, sudden, overpowering, before she could scream, run, or even understand what was happening. This wasn't a basement, it was a trap, one he had spent years designing just for her. One of the most evil father-daughter moments in human history, and she never saw it coming. When Elisabeth woke in that cellar, she wasn't met with chaos or shouting. She was met with silence, the kind that presses against your ears, thick and suffocating until you realize there is no way out. The first days blurred into each other, no sunlight, no clock. Just the hum of fluorescent lamps and the slow drip of water sliding down concrete walls. She was chained at first, confined to a few feet of cold floor. Her father controlled every second, every breath, every scrap of food that came through the door. And that door, layer after layer of hidden locks, mechanisms, and reinforced barriers, became the boundary between two completely different worlds. Fritzl maintained power through a twisted mix of cruelty and calculated kindness. Threats one day, small gifts the next. Lies about booby traps, poison gas, electrified doors. Anything to convince Elisabeth that escape meant death, and repeated all forms of assaults to keep her powerless. And over time, she stopped believing she'd ever see real daylight again. The assaults were constant, the control was total, and slowly that cellar transformed from a prison into an underground life. A life she had no choice but to survive. Years passed. Children were born in conditions no human should ever experience. No doctors, no air, no space. Just a mother doing everything she could in a room barely large enough to stand upright. Some of these children grew up having never seen the sky, learning to walk on concrete floors, speaking in hushed tones because normal childhood noise simply didn't fit in a place like that. Meanwhile, above them, the world went on. Family birthdays, meals, holidays, completely unaware of the parallel universe beneath their feet. With Elisabeth sealed underground, Fritzl knew one thing. He needed a story. A lie strong enough to keep police, neighbors, and even his own wife from asking the wrong questions. And so the cult narrative began. Elisabeth, trapped beneath the house, was forced to write letters, pages claiming she'd run away, joined a spiritual group, and didn't want to be found. Fritzl delivered these letters himself, carefully postmarked from distant towns to make them look real. To the authorities, it was convincing enough. A troubled young woman who had run off. But his cover-up didn't stop there. As children were born in the cellar, Fritzl staged their appearance above ground like twisted gifts from a daughter finding herself in a cult. He left infants on the doorstep with handwritten notes from Elisabeth, begging her parents to raise them. Social services reviewed the letters, reviewed the babies, and approved the placements every single time. No home visits to check where the mother might be. No deeper investigation. No suspicion that something unthinkable was happening right beneath their feet. In any functioning system, even multiple abandoned babies from the same missing mother would trigger alarms. Here, it triggered paperwork. Fritzl didn't just hide Elisabeth, he hid the truth in plain sight, and the world believed him. Elisabeth gave birth to 7 children in total. The first 2 stayed underground simply because Joseph had no cover story yet. And you can't make an older baby magically appear on a doorstep without raising suspicion. Later, once he began using the cult lie, he carried the next infants upstairs with fake letters to make it look like Elisabeth had abandoned them. But by the time the last child, Felix, was born, Joseph's wife was too old to care for another baby, and his entire story was already starting to fall apart. So Felix stayed underground. After 19 years underground, Elisabeth's oldest child, Kirsten, became dangerously ill. Her body, starved of sunlight, clean air, and medical care, began to shut down. She struggled to breathe, drifted in and out of consciousness. Elisabeth knew her daughter would die in that cellar if nothing changed. For the first time in decades, Joseph faced something he couldn't control with locks or lies. So he did the unthinkable. He carried Kirsten out of the bunker and drove her to the hospital. Doctors took one look at her and knew instantly that something was very wrong. No medical history, severe malnutrition, a suspicious letter from Elisabeth. None of it added up. Hospitals alert authorities. Authorities alert the media. And soon every news broadcast in Austria was pleading, "Elisabeth, if you are out there, please come forward. Your daughter may not survive." Down in the cellar, in the pale glow of a small TV, Elisabeth and her sons watched the world finally call her name. For the first time in 24 years, hope felt real. She begged Joseph to let her go, just long enough to help the doctors understand her daughter's condition. And for the first time in 24 years, he hesitated. The pressure, the lies, the investigation forming around him, it was all closing in. So he agreed. That evening, Joseph brought Elisabeth and her 2 remaining underground sons to the hospital, pretending she had returned from the cult. But his plan fell apart the moment they walked through the doors. Doctors and officers immediately noticed something was off. Elisabeth looked terrified, undernourished, her hair nearly white. Nothing like a woman who had just returned from a cult. And the moment staff began asking basic questions, Joseph's story started to crack. Whispers spread through the hallway. Eyes turned toward him. Pressure tightened around every lie he had told for 24 years. Sensing the shift, officers quietly separated Elisabeth from Joseph, just for routine questions. For a moment she froze. Decades of fear don't disappear in a hallway. But then she asked the officers for a single promise. "I'll tell you everything. but only if I never have to see him again." They agreed. And there, after 24 years of silence, Elisabeth finally spoke. Not in detail, not graphically, but enough to reveal the unthinkable truth. And what police found under that house would traumatize them forever. Guided by Elisabeth's confession, officers moved toward the basement of the Fritzl home, a place no one had questioned for 24 years. Behind the workshop shelves, they found the first hidden door, then another and another. Each layer felt wrong, too heavy, too deliberate, too engineered for a family home. When the final steel door groaned open, a wave of stagnant air hit them. Thick, sour, metallic, the kind of darkness that doesn't just fill a room, it clings to walls. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, moisture dripped from concrete. Children's drawings covered mildewed tiles, beds, clothes, toys, a fully lived-in world. In a space no human being should ever have seen. In court, Elisabeth Fritzl tried to hide behind a blue folder, a coward shielding himself from the world he terrorized. His lawyers made pathetic attempts to soften his image, pointing to gifts he'd brought underground, even a Christmas tree, as if that erased decades of horror. But nothing could compete with the truth. Elisabeth's recorded testimony, calm, precise, devastating, silenced the entire courtroom. The verdict was inevitable: life in prison. And years later, even after he was moved from a psychiatric facility to a regular prison, his lawyer begged for release due to dementia. The court still said nope. This monster stays locked up until he rots. After the rescue, Elisabeth and her children were placed under intense medical and psychological care. Slowly, they stepped back into a world they hadn't seen in decades. Sunlight, open space, freedom. Their identities remained protected, their location undisclosed, giving them the chance to heal far from the shadow of the house that imprisoned them. Fritzl disappeared behind concrete and steel, but Elisabeth's family began again, quietly, bravely. Another monster exposed, and another reminder of how strong real survivors can be. Tell me in the comments, what shocked you most about this case? Stay curious, stay safe, and if you want more stories from the dark, hit subscribe. Until next time, cute little mortal.